Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is elect. Let's take a look at some of the ways we can use this verb. The most likely way you're going to hear this verb used is to mean to choose someone to hold public office or some other position by voting. A second way we can use this verb is to mean to choose to do something. I have a couple example sentences later that will use this particular definition. Elect is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, all we need to do is add ing to form electing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. The verb elect ends with a T sound, so the ed is going to make an id sound. Elected, elected. After some of our verbs earlier this week where we had lots of phrasal verbs, you might be relieved to know that I don't have any additional meanings or usages for this particular verb. So let's continue to practice using the verb elect in some different verb tenses. Today we'll talk about the simple past, simple present, and the present perfect. Let's start with the simple past. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that was completed at a definite time in the past. Now, in each sentence, there might not be a clear reference to a particular point in time that's in the past, but it's generally understood as part of conversation or part of the paragraph or story that you might be reading. So in the affirmative, we're going to use that ed form, the past tense form of the verb, no matter what the subject is. Here's an example sentence. Residents elected the new mayor in a landslide. Okay? So this sentence doesn't have a clear reference to time, but it could be part of a broader story, and so it would have been understood, the date that happened. And I realize maybe landslide might be a newer phrase for you. This is really trying to say that the new mayor had a overwhelming majority of votes. So the election wasn't very close between 2 or 3 candidates. There was a very clear winner. Next, let's look at making a negative sentence in the simple past tense. To do this, we want to use did not and then the base verb. We're not going to use the ed form with the negative. You also might hear native speakers use the contraction form didn't. Here's an example sentence. They didn't elect to have dental or vision insurance. So here is that second definition about making a choice. Here, this sentence might seem a little odd to you, but if you work full-time, then you might be coming up on your benefit election season. So this is the time where people select different health insurance plans that they may want for the upcoming year. So in this particular sentence, what we're saying is someone did not choose to have dental or vision insurance. Next, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, we'll start with did, then we'll have our subject, and then the base verb. Here's an example. Did the shareholders elect a new board of directors? So when you hear this verb elect, you're probably thinking of politics and government. And that is most likely the most common way that you will hear this verb used. But it's not the only way, and it's not the only time that there are elections. Here we're talking about a public company, and the shareholders, the people who own stock in the company, are selecting who they want to help manage the organization. Now, let's take a look at the simple present. We're going to use this verb tense to talk about habits, routines, and facts. And the thing we should know is that when our subject is singular, so he, she, or it, we need to add an S to the verb in the affirmative. And you're going to see that here in my first example sentence. The United States elects a president every 4 years. This is a factual statement. It's also describing the country's routine as well. If I had been referring to more than one country, then I would just use the base verb elect. Next, let's look at making a negative sentence in the simple present. To do this, we're going to use do not and the base verb, or does not and our base verb. You might hear native speakers use the contractions do, don't, and doesn't. Here's an example. The U.S. doesn't elect Supreme Court judges. They are appointed and confirmed. So, again, what this sentence is saying is that the United States people do not get to vote on a new Supreme Court judge. If I want to make a yes or no question in the simple present, I'm going to start with do or does, then I'll have my subject, and then the base verb. Does your state elect its judges? Some states here in the United States do. Others, again, will appoint. So the governor, for example, might say, this person has been selected for this particular position. Next, let's look at the present perfect. We're going to use this verb tense to talk about an action that started in the past and continues into the present, or an action that occurred some point in the past tense, but we don't know when, or it's not important. We call this the indefinite past tense. To make the present perfect, we need two parts. We're going to use have or has, depending on our subject, and then we're going to use our ed form of the verb. Let's look at an example. She has elected to have her hip replacement surgery after there is a COVID-19 vaccine. So this particular verb, elect, is something you might hear in regards to medical treatment or surgery. And we'll see another connection to that just a little bit later as we look at other forms of this word. So again, this sentence just means she is making a choice to have the surgery later. Next, let's look at making a negative present perfect sentence. To do this, we're going to insert not after have or has, and you may hear the contraction forms hasn't or haven't. And then we'll continue to use that ed form of the verb. The team hasn't elected captains yet. So this is fairly common on sports teams at the high school level, college, and even professional, that there are some leaders who are selected or voted on by the other team members. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, we will start with have or has, then we'll have our subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Have the employees elected their benefits for 2021 yet? So again, this is connecting to that meaning of making a choice. Now, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb. The first word we're going to look at is a word I imagine you're hearing a great deal if you're living here in the United States and you ever have a television on. And that word is election. It's a noun, and it means a formal, organized choice by vote of a person for a political office or position. Here's an example sentence. The U.S. presidential election will be held on Tuesday, November 3rd. The next word we're going to look at is an adjective. It's elective. The meaning here is chosen or not required. So this is connecting back to that second definition of our verb. And I have two example sentences because I thought that they both might illustrate some different ways you'll hear this used. So the first sentence is, she's having elective surgery. If you remember back to that present perfect sentence about a hip replacement, that's the idea. So this, if we describe surgery as elective, you don't need it to continue living, right? There are some procedures that if we don't let a doctor perform surgery immediately, we might die. Okay? That is very much required surgery. But there are times where maybe our lives would just be easier or better. And the idea of a hip replacement or a knee replacement so that you are able to walk more comfortably or more easily. Again, it could be a good thing for your life, but it's not going to keep you alive. A second way that you might hear this adjective used is in relation to coursework or classes. So, an example of that, this class is an elective. So you might not need the class in order to graduate, in order to have a particular major. It's just something you find interesting and a class you want to take. The next adjective we're going to look at is electable. Now, this is connecting back to our first definition of the verb elect. So it means having the qualities which make election likely. And here it is in a sentence. Do you think that candidate is electable? And many times we hear this adjective used as people are beginning to consider whether they might run for office. And now we're in a place where there are teams of people that will do research and figure out, is this someone that many people would vote for? Of course, we have the opposite adjective next, unelectable. Right? And we might recognize that prefix un, it means not. So this is unable to be elected or not likely to be elected. Here's an example of that adjective. These candidates' extreme views make them unelectable. So here we might have somebody that does not have very common beliefs, so they seem quite extreme. That person is not likely to be elected. The last word we're going to look at here is re-elect. It's a verb, and it means to elect someone to an additional term of office. So once a person is selected, so people vote, they win that particular election, right? They serve and they decide, I want to continue holding this office, then we're going to hear this verb a lot. An example sentence here, will this representative be re-elected? Connected to this, you should know that re-election as a noun also exists. And it's this idea of a formal or organized choice by vote again. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.